Hello, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this important discussion, and I hope everyone is staying safe, especially during this time. So just for introduction purposes, my name is China Sek. I am currently a rising senior now at NYU. I'm a student of the Gallatin School of Individualized Study, where I'm creating my own major on Black women's health with a focus on reproductive justice and maternal health, and I'm also a pre-health student at NYU. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining us, and I would also like to introduce Melissa Carter and Zoe Ragouzeos, who will be joining us in this discussion today, sharing their remarks and just kind of giving everyone answers to questions that we've been seeing a lot. So I would like Melissa first to kind of introduce yourself, talk about the office that you're part of and what your role is, and then Zoe can follow after.
Sure. Thanks so much, China. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Melissa Carter, and I'm the Associate Director of Global Spiritual Life, and I'm the Head of Mindfulness Education and Programming. Global Spiritual Life is a center on campus that is an open, authentic, and vibrant community at the forefront of international conversations on religion, spirituality, and mindfulness. Our mission is to put love into education and to offer environments and tools for transformative multi-faith and spiritual encounters at NYU and beyond, being challenged, being able to have spaces to process, and also including healing. So we'll get in a little bit more of that through the questions, but that is Global Spiritual Life, and I am Melissa, and I'm going to pass it on to Zoe.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. Hi, I'm Zoe Ragouzeos. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with a PhD in social work from NYU, and I oversee the mental health services for NYU. And we are a 57 clinician service that offers individual counseling and clinical treatment of all kinds to all NYU students. And I look forward to talking more about our resources once the discussion gets started. I wanted to extend a warm welcome to our students, and we can't wait to see you in the fall.
Thank you for those introductions. I'm very excited for this conversation. And I just want to remind the viewers and people who are viewing this discussion that we have already pre-submitted questions that we're going to start off with. But please be sure to, if you have any questions, to complete them in the Q&A button that you can see on your screen, and then we'll be able to answer those questions after. So let's get started with the first question. The first question is, what strategies or effective coping mechanisms do you most want our community to be aware of as we enter a very unusual fall 2020? So anyone?
So I'll take that question. I wanted to start by saying that I will be discussing effective coping strategies. But the most effective strategy is for students to ask for what they need. And there is no shame in asking for help. This is a quite unusual time. And so people should expect to need help. So we encourage students to speak to family members, tell someone how you're feeling. It's not unreasonable to need professional assistance during this time. And there is a strength in asking for that kind of support. I also did want to say that while we are collectively experiencing an unusual time, this is not a monolithic experience for all of us. And that while I'll talk about strategies that we think work generally, we do want to acknowledge that different people are experiencing this time in very different ways. Somebody said to me at the start of all of this that we might be in the same boat, but we are weathering different storms, and that is for sure, and I did want to put that out there. But in terms of effective strategies, the first thing we always try to tell people is to try to manage the kinds of information you're getting. We live in a 24/7 world where information is constantly coming at us. And so sticking to the facts is actually quite a challenge. So that would be the first thing I would say in terms of effective coping strategies, is to identify unbiased sources of information, however you define that, and look to those for your information. I would also remind students that social media is not unbiased, and that certainly people come on there and talk about their opinions, and it could be quite stressful to continue to read about other people's opinions on these matters. The other thing I would say is to try and limit the amount of time you're spending looking for updates. And so while, as we know, things are changing from minute to minute, it is unhealthy to be constantly looking for the next update. So what we like to tell students is figure out for you what works in terms of accessing information. Is that once a day? Is that 3 times a day? And try to stick to those trusted sources of information to be accessing. Other coping strategies include accepting what you can and can't control. An example of something you can't control is a travel restriction, is a quarantine requirement. These are not things you can control. However, there's so much that we can control, including managing our own health. That is, washing your hands and eating and sleeping and exercising and using those face coverings. Those are things that can keep us safe and that we can control. Maintaining our daily routine is something that we can control. Unstructured time sometimes makes us feel more anxious. And so coming up with that daily schedule, making sure that there's time to work and to read and to talk to friends and to exercise and to focus on your schoolwork, really that will make for something that you can control, which will make you feel better. Another thing I would say is staying connected to others, right? We are socially distant at this time, but we can still stay connected. There's lots of ways to do that over Zoom, and there are many affinity groups and support groups that are virtual that we encourage people to be involved with so that they can stay socially connected even though physically we are distant.
Thank you for the response. Melissa, do you have a response to that question as well?
Zoe really nailed everything, actually, I would say, from a mindfulness perspective. And there's nothing I would really add other than emphasize that structured time, as Zoe's mentioned, allows us to feel what we can control and to include breaks from technology, as Zoe mentioned. But I'd also say take joyful and playful breaks as well. Can you gamify, if you're in home working with your family, can you gamify your self-care in a way that makes your self-care stays foundational and preventative and is not just from a cleanup and crisis standpoint? So drinking that water or taking those breaks or walking around the block with your mask on with fellow students, potentially new classmates that you meet virtually or in person in class, and with their family and friends if you're at home, is what can you do to gamify your self-care to make sure it stays at the forefront and not always at the cleanup.
Thank you. So I guess the next question is discussing more about how a lot of students have experienced a lot of trauma and loss during this time, and some are even grieving loss of a loved one, or others are just mourning, what their old life used to be. So what are some advice that you would give to students who are struggling in those ways?
Yeah, so what we're talking about here is the management of grief and loss, but also the management of really hard emotions, fear and loneliness and isolation and depression and anxiety. And the first thing I would say is we have to appreciate and be respectful of our feelings. We're going to have these reactions. They're uncontrollable in some ways. We should expect to have that range of feelings. And that those feelings will come and go and cycle through us. It's not, you don't overcome it and never feel it again. And then as a second step, once we appreciate our feelings and respect our feelings, is to try to track and anticipate our feelings. We are in the middle of a prolonged crisis. It is going to be a strain on everybody. You have to think about the kinds of things that make you feel certain ways and try to get in front of them if that's at all possible. So an example is, you used to do this amazing run, around the park, but now the park is closed, given the health concerns. You know that if you don't do that run, that might not make you feel good. And so trying to think about something else you could be doing that might mitigate that feeling you might lose by not doing that particular run, or not being able to see all of your friends. If you're a social person, not being able to see your friends physically is going to be really hard for you, and it's going to evoke negative feelings. So what can you be doing to try to get in front of that and try to mitigate that, and conceivably try to engender some good feelings instead of waiting for the bad ones to come? And then it's about protecting yourself against unnecessary bad feelings. So we're going to feel bad feelings. You know, this is not a time where we can assume we will always be joyful. But what can we do to avoid the unnecessary ones? So are you sleeping? Are you exercising? Are you connecting with people? All of these can be helpful. The other thing I would say is there's lots of things that are not working right now, but there are some things that are. In this moment, listening to this webinar, you are safe. Your Zoom is working, right? You might have your lights on. You maybe have had to interact with the medical system during this time, and maybe they took care of you. Many people are wearing masks. Many people are respectful of social distancing. Some things are working to keep you safe. Another thing I would say is look for the helpers, right? There's lots of people that are helping. Your supermarket is open. The mail is being delivered. Medical staff are where they need to be to assist. Lots of people are volunteering. It could make us feel good to know that there are other people that are around taking care of us. And then finally, I would say look for ways you can give back. There are tons of local community efforts, big and small, that you can be involved with in safe ways. Giving back always makes people feel like they're contributing, that we're in it together, and that can engender positive feelings. Remind yourself that you have positive feelings and that there's no shame in having some positive feelings at a time where everything may feel like it's going wrong. Ask yourself what still makes you feel grateful or thankful. Some will say it's increased time with family members. Some will say they had time to organize their closet or have, time to complete a project in a way they never did before. Some will say that, not commuting has made them feel grateful or thankful. So reminding ourselves that we still have some positive feelings. And also that you've done this before. You may not have surmounted this particular challenge, but you've surmounted other ones. And what did you learn? Can some of that work for you again? Can the coping that you learned and the resilience that you have gained help you in this moment, either by being modified or just as it is? Can that help you in this moment? You have certainly endured and overcome other issues before, and I just wanted to make sure to remind us all of that strength that we have.
Thank you. You spoke a lot about just hard emotions and feelings of anxiety and fear. And I know that those feelings are also enhanced by just the thought of returning back to school. So Melissa, what recommendations do you have for those who may feel this way, who have these emotions when thinking about returning to school?
Now I'm on mute. Absolutely. First, I would normalize the feelings, exactly what Zoe's saying. It's not abnormal to feel anxious or to have fears in a time when we're going into something, this very unusual, unprecedented time frame that we're entering. And to remember that we are entering it together, and we're in the same ocean, we're in different boats, and to have empathy and gentleness for yourself and compassion for yourself and others, that your faculty, staff, students, everyone in some way is navigating these waters in very different ways and coping it in different ways, and to have empathy and compassion for yourself and for others and know that we're all dealing with this. I would also say that to start to acknowledge when the anxiety and fear is coming up, right? And maybe taking you out of alignment from feeling grounded and centered. And a coping strategy that you can use when you're able to acknowledge and catch that anxiety or that fear or that worry that's making you feel not centered or grounded is a breathing technique as simple as taking an inhale in for 4 and an exhale out for 4. Zoe and China, would you do it with me for a moment? Okay, great. So we'll just take a deep inhale in for 4 through the nose and back out through the nose for 4. And as you're doing it, maybe allow your shoulders to drop. Really feel your feet on the floor. Feel your body, feel the sensations of your skin, and continue that breathing pattern in for 4, out for 4, in for 4, till you start to feel more balanced and you can actually respond to what's happening around you rather than react. Another thing I would say is this is where Zoe put it perfectly about the tracking our feelings, is to create a plan, get ahead of it. know that in certain situations that you might be entering will make you feel anxious or bring up some of those fears. Get ahead of it and have a plan of, oh, you know what? I know that when I read this dialogue, or when I talk to this person, or when this happens, these feelings come up with me. Here's something that I can do. So you already in your back pocket have a tool to pull out if you need it. And the last thing I would say is radical, radical, radical self-care, and just know that it's a very normal thing to feel these things. They're going to come up, and I'll continue talking about self-care as we continue this conversation and tools to use in this time.
Thank you. That actually leads perfectly into the next question, which is what mental health resources and wellness and mindful resources will be in place to assist students in navigating this fall semester, and what can be done to support the Black community, especially and other communities that have been disproportionately impacted by COVID and recent events in regards to mental health.
Sure, so I can start. We have something we call the Wellness Exchange, and it's our primary mental health resource on campus. It has many services attached to it. One of the most prominent is our 24/7 hotline for students, where you can receive phone support regarding any day-to-day challenge or health concern that you're experiencing. Also attached to that 24/7 service is a chat to a counselor service. So if you, and some students have expressed that they would prefer to use the chat feature, perhaps they are in situations where they can't speak privately, or they would rather not verbalize their thoughts, they would prefer to text them. So this is a 24/7 ability to chat or text with a licensed counselor. In order to have access to that, you need to download the NYU Wellness Exchange app. That's all you have to search in your app store, NYU Wellness Exchange, and you'll be able to download that app, and you'll be able to use that feature. And also you can call the hotline that way as well. Needless to say, we have 24/7 emergency response. If a student ever needs us, it doesn't matter what time it is. We have staff who are on call every single day of the year, regardless of whether the university is open or closed. All of our services will continue to be offered in the fall 2020, and they will be remote in continued response to COVID-19. That being said, we're still offering individual treatment and group treatment and wellness workshops, which are psychoeducational workshops around a long list of issues, from anxiety to depression to procrastination. And so those have been quite popular with our students in the past. We will even do our drop-in services virtually. So you would call the hotline, you would ask to speak to a counselor, and the meeting is then converted to a Zoom session where people can be looking at each other and having a drop-in conversation just like that. I did want to say to our students of color, and in response to the second part of your question, we know that students of color face different and additional challenges in accessing and benefiting from mental health services. We also know that representation matters. So I wanted to assure our students of color that our doctors and nurse practitioners and counselors are diverse as it relates to race and ethnicity and gender and sexual orientation. 35% of our counselors personally identify as of color. And moreover, if we can't meet your desired demographic preference, we will refer to a number of professionals in the community who can. We do have a support group just for our students of color called Identity and Society. And we also have counselors based at the Center for Multicultural Education and Programs full-time. We have counselors at the Islamic Center, and we have counselors in the various schools for students who might prefer not to walk through the central service.
I'm going to jump in here and share what's going on at Global Spiritual Life as well. Zoe, were you complete there?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Global Spiritual Life as well, in a response to COVID and the continued response, will be remote for fall 2020. We have a full, robust yoga and meditation program that will be available online. We also have student-led groups, meditation groups, including Stay Woke and Meditate, and Out Breath. Stay Woke and Meditate and Out Breath are affinity spaces led by students. For Stay Woke and Meditate is for BIPOC community, and Out Breath is for our LGBTQ plus community. We also have, in response to COVID, moved our mindful activism program online, which is a speaker series that speaks about teaming contemplative inner practices with outward activism through speaking and social engagement. I want to speak directly to the Black community as well. We've created Liberation Lunches, which is going to be a monthly program online that you can attend, where we'll have Black spiritual teachers offering different types of religious and spiritual wisdom and practices for us to be in dialogue together on. We also have Rise and Rest, which is going to be a monthly healing space for Black faculty, staff, and students to be together in poetry, song, meditation, and community. We know that we need to have these spaces to be together, and we also know we need to have spaces to be NYU together as well. So Global Spiritual Life, a ton of different programming, at least 2 yoga classes a day, 1 meditation class a day, affinity spaces, even within our yoga program, including queer yoga and Stay Woke and Move, which is for centering BIPOC community. And I believe I covered all of our services that we have.
And China, before we go on, there's a question that just came through about whether students from abroad can access wellness services. The answer is certainly yes. We have toll-free numbers for our hotline in 13 different cities around the world that can be found on our website. If you are not located in one of those locations, and you choose not to use the hotline, you could use the chat service, which is certainly available regardless of the student's location. And all of our services, to the extent that we can legally provide services to you in the country where you're located, we will absolutely do that regardless of your location around the world. We have always done that. We have counselors in 12 different cities around the world, given all of our global locations. And even beyond those, we will serve you, again, to the extent that we are legally allowed to do so, we will absolutely serve our students.
Thank you, Zoe. I want to add to that too. We're currently rearranging our programming and our times to have later programming with our yoga and meditation classes and early morning yoga and meditation classes to accommodate international hours. And there's 2 pieces of services I left off that will also be remote and are resources for the entire community. And that is our spiritual life advisors. We have up to 60 spiritual life advisors ready, willing, and able and open to offer any spiritual guidance that a student may need. This can be specific to your lived experience, and you can reach out via our website or our Instagram, which will be links in the chat box, to get connected to a spiritual life advisor that meets your needs. And I want to also mention one other club that we work with is Mosaic. And Mosaic is for students of color. It's a faith-based led student group. And so these student-led groups are really, really engaging, very supportive, and it's a space for you and your peers to sit in dialogue, process, and be together. So thanks, Zoe, for throwing me the ball there. I did neglect to bring that up.
Thank you. So as we just heard, GSL is offering a lot of spiritual wellness care and resources that are going to be offered virtually and during the fall semester. But as we all know, sometimes those offerings and those resources for some people are just not enough, especially when they're struggling emotionally and mentally. So when do you think is an appropriate time for someone struggling to reach out to the Wellness Exchange and to trained health professionals, whenever they're feeling these feelings?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that there is no doubt that there are psychological and physical benefits to meditation practice and nourishing oneself spiritually. These can be powerful ways to slow down and quiet your mind and step back from distressing thoughts, learn how to sit with those powerful emotions like depression, like anxiety, as they rise and fall within your body, hopefully gradually losing their power over you. I say hopefully, however, because sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes these dark feelings take hold and you can't shake them. And as hard as you try, these feelings are impacting your daily functioning. If you find that the mechanisms that you are using to cope are negative or dangerous or unhealthy, and that you're choosing behaviors that you once would not have chosen to cope with these dark and negative emotions, that would be a time to reach out to a licensed professional. And so what I mean by impacting your daily functioning is, you know, I used to wake up and go for a run in the morning, or I used to wake up and meditate, or I used to wake up and join one of these you know, virtual social experiences. And now I'm sleeping all day, right? I find that I can't study, I can't focus. I find that I'm irritable. I find that I'm losing relationships because of the way I'm feeling and behaving. I find that I'm using substances in ways that I never did in order to cope with negative feelings. You know, if meditation can work to solve that, or if spirituality can help you to solve that, then you're doing a great thing. If it's not impacting to the point where you do feel like you're using dangerous methods of coping or unhealthy ones, that's when you would reach out to a licensed professional.
Thank you. And again, this leads to the next question, because like I mentioned earlier, as a senior, and I'm sure other people who are students who are listening to this as well, I'm trying to figure out different ways as to how I can stay motivated for my studies, and having difficult times. Like, what are ways for me to continue to be motivated and continue to feel like an actual student?
Yeah, I'd be happy to offer some mindful ways to stay motivated with your studies. One way is to just remember your why. Why are you here? Why are you on this path? What makes you light up? What makes you passionate about what you're learning? And to remember that and bring that into every day. And another mindful way to engage with your studies so you can be motivated and then know when it's time to take some time off from studying is to bookend it. Is to set a certain amount of time that you know for the next 30 to 45 minutes, I'm with my studies right now. And then what do you need to do before you enter that engagement with your studies to get yourself centered and grounded? It could be some meditation. It could be a breathing technique. It could be nourishing your body, making sure you have a cup of tea or water. What type of music do you like to have playing or not playing? What's going on in your environment to the best of your ability that you can set up yourself in a way that you can be focused and distraction free? One is I turn off, do not disturb on my watch that alerts me every time my phone rings, or put my phone on silent. And then do your 30 to 45 minutes. And maybe every, 20 minutes taking some deep breaths to remind yourself of what you're doing. And then bookend it and make sure you have something to do completely different afterwards that has nothing to do with your studies. Something that touches play and joy, or something else that interests you to exercise another part of your brain. So bookending really allows you to be focused for that set of time. It trains you, you know what you need to get done, and then you can move on. And another one is to get engaged with your fellow classmates. If you're in a virtual setting, maybe putting in the chat box, hey, my name is China, this is what I'm studying, this is what I'm interested in. Anyone else want to maybe create a virtual study group with me? And that way, one, you're meeting new people and you're engaging with your community. Or do this with the friends that you may already have. So what support can you put around you to set you up so you can be focused? And who can you also dialogue with about what you're learning and what you're doing that have similar interests or want to learn about what you're interested in? That's what I would suggest.
Thank you. But I'm wondering, for those who do not have a spiritual community, they don't know where to go for spiritual community, or they don't have access to spiritual advisement, what does GSL offer for them, and how can they, access those resources?
Sure. And again, I want to really suggest our spiritual life advisors, over 60 of them from different religious traditions, Abrahamic, non-Abrahamic, from different races and sexual orientations, and they're connected to other communities as well, not just the DSL community. So you're going to be able to dive deeper into religious and spiritual community by just reaching out and saying, hey, I have an interest. Or if you're just spiritually curious and not know what the path is, check out Welcome Programs app. We have a Welcomes Program event coming up that's for the spiritually curious. That's for someone that is interested potentially in interfaith community building or multi-faith leadership. We also have a multi-faith leadership advisory council, which is a set of students from all different faiths that come together to learn from each other's faiths and then create programming out of those learnings for the student body. We actually have some available spots, so if you're interested, please email us, and the email will be in the chat box. So the Spiritual Life Advisors, check out our programming. We're really going to be offering dynamic programming around interfaith community building, around multi-faith leadership, and then specific to different religions on campus that are seen and unseen, so we can begin to learn from each other and allow spiritual hygiene to be part of the experience and not just the cleanup when we enter burnout or crisis.
Thank you for that, for those answers. They're so amazing. Learning about all the resources that are going to be available for all the students during the fall. And additionally, for students who are by themselves and are feeling anxious and are feeling overwhelmed and stressed, what are some mindfulness practices that they can do in the moment to kind of just release those tensions and those feelings?
Sure. So the 1-to-1 breathing ratio that we only did for one round, but you can use it at any time, anywhere. I've actually done it a few times while we've been sitting here. It just allows you to center yourself. The primal stem of our brain is constantly being activated because of the uncertainty, because of the anxiety, because of the fear, which pushes us into fight, flight, or freeze. These breathing techniques allow us to and help us support us calming down, coming to ground, and center. Another great mindfulness technique would be something called stop. And if you're out there listening and you can grab a pen, write this down. So stop. S. Stop whatever you're doing and just pause. T. Take a few deep breaths. Reconnect with the breath. The breath is your anchor back to the present moment. So breathing in that in for 1, in for 4, out for 4, until you begin to feel a sense of balance again. And observe what's happening. Notice what's around you. Notice what's going on. What's happening inside you? What's happening outside you? And then P, proceed only if you feel balanced. Or start again, right? You may decide that, you know what, I can't be here. I can't do this. I've now realized it. I gotta go. Go. Or if you do feel grounded and balanced, proceed. And continue breathing, continue allowing yourself to stop and take that pause whenever you need. So the 1-to-1 breathing technique and then stop are great tools to have in your back pocket.
Thank you. Definitely be taking those into account when I'm feeling those moments of stress. And I know earlier, Melissa, you mentioned radical self-care. And I was wondering, what do you suggest for people who are feeling uncertain and in times where we want to start to build our own self-care practice? How can we build a sustainable one? And how can we also get others to support the self-care plan that we created for ourselves?
Sure. And this is where I always say, like, we have to be like water. We have to be fluid and we have to be adaptable, that sometimes the care that we had yesterday may not be the care that we need today. But the way that we can get ahead, again, in putting self-care at the forefront and not just in cleanup, is really being able to identify what is indulgent self-care, what is practical self-care, what is fundamental self-care, and what is necessary self-care. And maybe even making out a list of those things. So you know, when I enter this situation, this is what I'm going to need. In order for me to show up my full self, I'm going to need to get good sleep. I'm going to need to have a well-balanced meal. I'm going to need to drink my water. I'm going to need to talk to my best friend, right? And plan that accordingly. Make an actual plan of care. And then a way to engage people to support you in that plan of care is get a care buddy. I call them care bears. Get an accountability partner in your self-care, where you actually create these plans together, you share them, and ask for accountability in them. And you can share that with your family, with your friends. I have a care bear that I check in with. I have systems set up that, you know, for example, doing a webinar like this, it takes a lot of energy, right, Zoe? Yeah, right. So afterwards, I have some time that I can just go and unwind and come down from this and take care of myself and not jump right back into my email or work. But that's something I've had to learn about myself that I need. So taking the time to really identify your needs and how you can care for them so you can show up in fullness. Now, again, check out the Welcome app, because in Welcome programs, we're going to be offering a spirituality and self-care program where we'll be creating these plans of care with you and giving you like step-by-step how to create a self-care plan. And then we're going to encourage you to meet people in the gathering so you can walk away with a Care Bear and a self-care plan. I hope that was helpful.
Okay. Yes, very helpful. And again, I'm taking note of all of this as well. Okay, so I guess for students like myself who are engaged in activist work and who also have a very heavy study course load, how do we engage in those type of things without burning out? And what resources does GSL offer to kind of support us in that?
Yeah, so I was talking earlier about the Mindful Activism Program and Mosaic. I want to talk about them again, but I also want to bring up the Office of Global Inclusion. They're doing tremendous work in diversity, equity, and inclusion, anti-Blackness racism and anti-racism programming, resources, and guides. And we work very closely with them in our programming around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I just want to offer that Office of Global Inclusion is there. Part of our programming specific to global spiritual life through a spiritual and mindfulness lens is that mindful activism program, where we take contemplative inner practices and marry it with outward activism. We've had Layla Saad come speak. We've had young Pueblo come speak. We have a slew of other speakers that are just as amazing that I don't want to share just yet, that will be coming come fall. We also have our Support Our Friends series on social media, which is culturally sensitive ways that we can support our friends of different faiths and going through difficult times. And then Mosaic is a student-led group, as I said, for students of color that is faith-based, that is around organizing, solidarity, and initiatives to build community in the fight for social justice and racial justice. So those are the programs that GSL are currently offering, and we continue to grow them and evolve them and asking for feedback and what the student body needs.
Thank you. I guess as a way to kind of wrap this up and kind of conclude, in a time of so much uncertainty and mourning, how do we enjoy all the wonderful things on campus and all the wonderful things that campus has to offer for students?
You know, this is one that I am also practicing, and I think it's to remember that it's not this whole thing, you're not alone in it. We're all going through it. China, you're going through it. I'm going through it. Zoe's going through it. And one thing that I always like to remember is yes and, right? Yes and is I can hold that right now we're living in really unfortunate, scary, uncertain times. And they're really difficult to go through. And they bring up really complex and difficult emotions and feelings. And there's a lot of things that you can be grateful for in your life. And there's a lot of joy and love and support. And to really hone in on those, to remember those, even if you have to write them down, so you can remind yourself of that when you're going through the difficult moments. So I always say, especially when it comes to activism, is we can hold this new world that we're building, and also know that we're not there yet, and we have to continue to build towards it. We can hold both, hold the dream and hold the fight. And it's the same thing for this, is yes and.
And, you know, I would say that it could be that some people have some guilt around trying to find joy around this time. It might feel trivial. It might even feel selfish. But we wanted to present you with the opposite idea around that, which is now more than ever, we should be looking for joy and happiness. All of these really heavy emotions are really taxing on our minds and on our bodies, and we have to find small ways to, you know, consume antidotes to that burden that we're all feeling. Melissa talked a lot about self-care. She talked about radical self-care, and that's really where I would start, is by saying double down on that self-care. Do what you have to do to feel better, because again, this is the most important time to try and find ways to feel more secure and safe and supported. That it will include the sleep, that will include the connecting with others. You know, the other thing that I'll say that has really helped some students is to try and organize their areas. We often feel out of control when our space is out of control, and that doesn't mean you have to have, you know, full rooms to yourself, but if you have areas to yourself, it might be worth trying to make that as organized as possible. That might bring you a little bit of peace and solace. Unless you're quarantining, we would say go outside. You know, wear your mask. I think Melissa said this earlier. Find a park. You know, we have Washington Square here. We have Central Park. We have a lot of beautiful green areas, more than maybe some would think. And while we have the warm weather, it can really bring people peace to find some time to be outside. And the last thing I'll say is there are creative and talented people who have dedicated their lives to students, who are determined to make students' experience here in the fall an excellent one. Melissa and I are among them, but there are so many others that you will hear from in future webinars. And so we want you to find that small joy here. In fact, we want you to find big joy. And we know that together we can make that happen.
And I'd like to add that everything Zoe's saying, which this will be an example of that, is it ripples and it models, right? So us acknowledging the reality and also touching joy, gratitude, and love, it ripples. And when we liberate ourselves to be in our full human experience, we're liberating someone else to do the same with that inspiration. So if we can all remember that and keep that on our hearts, we're going to have a very unusual, interesting fall, but we're going to show up to it, and we're going to show up to it together.
Thank you so much for answering these questions and just kind of giving a sense of clarity, because there's a lot of uncertainty that's been going on. And I was just wondering, do you have anything else that you want to add, or just kind of like restate so that everyone can be aware of what's going on? Okay, perfect. So as you see in the chat, we have been adding all the resources in where you can find the links and where you can find more descriptions on what's will be presented today. But also, if you missed it, please go to the NYureturns website where this webinar will be posted, and also other resources and other webinars that have been recorded in the past. You can find those as well. And also, we encourage you to visit the Ideal Scale campaign, where you can kind of just add your ideas and contribute to ways you think that students need more resources and support. And just continue to do that. That campaign ends on Monday, July 27th. So we love to hear your ideas. We want to know what students are looking for and what students are wanting to get answers for. And just continue to check the NYureturns website, and just to kind of be more up to date about what's going on for the fall semester. As you mentioned, there's a lot going on in terms of just wellness and mindfulness. And we hope everyone stays safe, and I hope everyone continues to enjoy their summer, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone in the fall. So thank you again for participating in this webinar.
Thank you, everyone. We look forward to meeting you and being with you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, China. Thank you, Zoe.